So some of you guys might know that during the pandemic, I started a live streaming series once a week where I talked about music theory applied to the guitar, and I called that Music Theory for Guitarists. If you haven't watched it yet, you can find a playlist down below in the description where you can find all of the 20 lessons for free. They are about 40 minutes to 1 hour long each lesson, and I try to cover as many concepts, as many topics and subjects as possible from the music theory field applied to the guitar. Now recently some of you asked me to make shorter videos about single topics that we can apply to the things that we play on this channel, to R&B guitar and neo soul guitar, and I decided to start with secondary dominants, which we use all the time in this style, and I want to explain the theory behind it and also show you immediately how to use that into a real chord progression. Now, for the sake of this example, we'll be in the key of C major, and I will assume that you guys know that when you play the C major scale, you can harmonize it and make 7 chords out of it, and these chords are C major 7 on the first degree, D minor 7 on the second, E minor 7 on the third, F major 7 on the fourth, G7 on the 5, A minor 7 on the 6th, and B half diminished, which is a minor 7 flat 5 on the 7th degree. You can obviously do that in triads, but I'm using 7th chords now because we are more likely to play 7th chords when we make our R&B and neo soul chord progressions. Now the concept of secondary dominance is fairly simple. We are introducing chords that don't belong to the key that we are playing. So we are using chords that are not one of these 7 that we just mentioned. They are external chords that we borrow because we want to create the tension to go to the next chord. So each of these chords can have a secondary dominant. And the role of the secondary dominant is to create, through a dominant 7 chord, the tension that will then be released when you reach the next chord. So we are assuming, we are pretending that the chords that we are considering will be, for a moment, the first degree of a new key. And we want to do a 5-1 in that new key. So we want to play the 5 of the chord that we are going to. Now, for example, if we are playing a D minor 7, the secondary dominant to go to D minor 7 would be A7, okay? Because A7 is the 5 of D minor 7. So you can consider that either a 5-7 of the 2 minor or 5-7 dominant of the 2 minor 7, or you can say A is also the 6th degree in the key of C, so I call this a 6 dominant 7, which is not usually what you find on the 6th degree. You normally find a minor 7, but in this way you can immediately realize there is something going on, which is the secondary dominant to go to the 2 minus 7. So we are creating a 5-1, where the 1 is actually the 2 minus 7, the D minus 7, okay? We can obviously repeat that to the other degrees. So if I'm looking at the E minus 7, the secondary dominant would be B7, okay? Which we can say it's either the 5-7 of the 3 minus 7, or it's the 7 dominant 7. And it creates this. But even the F major 7, the 4th degree, would have a secondary dominant, and that is C7, which you can say it's the 5-7 of the 4, or it's the 1 dominant 7. So we are making the first chord, the first degree, we are making it a dominant 7 to go to the 4. Okay, can you hear that? Tension, release. Okay, now when we're talking about G7, the 5th chord, the 5th degree, the secondary dominant to go there would be a D. So it's a D7 which goes to G7, and again you can call it the 5-7 of the 5 or the 2 dominant 7 of the key. Okay, then when we go to A minus 7, well, the secondary dominant would be E7. So E7 is the 5-7 of the 6 minor, okay, the 5 of the chord you're going to, or it is the 3 dominant 7, okay? Now, so far we saw 5 secondary dominant chords, so 5 secondary dominants going to 5 of the 7 chords that we have available in the key of C major. Why don't we see 7 secondary dominants? Well, first of all, because the first degree, C major 7, already has a dominant chord going to, the 1, and that is the 5 of the key. So the 5 of the key is now what we call the primary dominant, okay? It is a dominant 7 chord which create tension that you then release on the 1, but it's already included in the harmonized scale. And that's what we call the primary dominant, and the reason why we call any other dominant 7 chord that you find a secondary dominant. Now, you're very likely to start introducing external chords in a key, starting from the secondary dominant, because they are chords that can really tell a story, like we will see in a minute with an example, okay? And the final thing I want to mention is that the 7th degree, which is a minor 7 flat 5, a half diminished chord, B half diminished, the 7th degree doesn't really have a secondary dominant, and the reason for it is because it's not considered a stable chord. Now let's apply this secondary dominant substitution to a classic chord progression that you could possibly play in C major. So what about playing something like a 4, 3 minor 7, 6 minor 7, 1, okay, that's, you know, nothing special, but it's a nice and common chord progression. F major 7, E minor 7, A minor 7, C major 7. We are just using 4 of the 7 chords available in C major. The 4 major 7, the 3 minor 7, the 6 minor 7, and the 1 major 7. Okay, so I'll do it again, I'll play it again. Starts again. Now, again, nothing wrong with this chord progression, but we can add some soul, some spice, especially if we want to get into a neo-soul territory by using the secondary dominant. Check this out. I can go to the A minor 7 using its secondary dominant, which we said earlier it was an E7. All we need to do is moving the E minor 7, like replacing really the E minor 7 that we had in the chord progression with an E7. Okay, so we are playing F major 7, now E7, secondary dominant of the A minor 7. Okay, now if you like, you can first play an E minor 7, then making it a dominant 7 chord, and then play the A minor 7. It would be like that. Also works, so it's up to you whether you want to replace the original chord with the secondary dominant or play them both. Okay, and then we can also go back to the F major 7 at the end of your chord progression through its secondary dominant, which would be C7. Okay, now C7 is also the 1 dominant 7, the 5 of the 4, but also the 1 dominant 7. So we can replace the C major 7 with the C7 and get something like F major 7, E7, A minor 7, C7. This is already more interesting and it tells a story. I can then start adding a few percussions, arpeggios, embellishments, and I will get my neo-soul chord progression using 2 secondary dominants. So I can start like no substitutions here, and then start making it more interesting. Etc. So you guys see that I could have used other things to make it more neo-soul. I could have used diminished 7 chords, more hammer-ons, pull-offs like embellishments, but I wanted to show you that even just starting with secondary dominants, you can learn this concept, the secondary dominants, and apply that to a real chord progression to make it interesting and neo-soul at the same time. Guys, if you like this chord progression, you can find the tab and the music notation on my Patreon page. The link is in the description below, and in this way you would support my channel. Let me know, guys, if you like this new lesson concept covering 1 music theory subject per lesson and applying that immediately to a chord progression and immediately on guitar to see how this sounds like. Obviously, if you do like this concept, let me know, guys, in the comments what other music theory subject you would like me to cover in the next lesson as well. Okay, anyway, that's all for this lesson, guys. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you next time.